In the last few weeks, a dramatic storm has begun to unfold across the global political arena, one that analysts are calling the most dangerous confrontation of the 21st century. Tensions between Venezuela and the United States, already strained for years, have now reached a breaking point. What began as diplomatic friction has evolved into a direct military standoff that could reshape the future balance of power. According to the Associated Press, the escalation erupted when Donald Trump, speaking before a roaring crowd in Texas, announced that the United States would expand its naval presence off the Venezuelan coast. His words, filled with defiance and strength, sent shockwaves across Latin America and beyond. Just days later, satellite images obtained by Naval News confirmed what many feared. A U.S. naval strike group had entered the Caribbean, spearheaded by the mighty aircraft carrier USS George Washington. Accompanying it were dozens of destroyers, support ships, and aircraft, a force powerful enough to alter the entire geopolitical landscape of the Western Hemisphere. In Caracas, the reaction was immediate and furious. President Nicolas Maduro, appearing before thousands of supporters, condemned Washington's actions as a declaration of the hunt, an open attempt to eliminate the leadership of a sovereign state. His speech, broadcast live across the nation, was filled with defiance. "We will resist. We will fight to the last bullet if necessary." The streets of Caracas soon turned into a sea of red and yellow banners. Tens of thousands of citizens poured out, chanting, "No to U.S. invasion," while state media painted their defiance as a heroic defense of national dignity. But just as the world braced for another US-Venezuela standoff, a new and unexpected player entered the scene: China. According to the Financial Times, Beijing officially announced the deployment of a Chinese naval fleet to the Atlantic Ocean, allegedly to protect international trade routes. However, insiders revealed a far more serious mission: direct military assistance to Venezuela. The South China Morning Post cited senior Chinese government sources confirming that dozens of warships, including guided missile destroyers and support vessels, were dispatched from Hainan. One official, speaking anonymously, issued a chilling statement. China will not allow tens of billions of dollars in investments to be jeopardized by an illegal regime change in Caracas. This was not an empty warning. Over the last decade, China has invested more than $70 billion in Venezuelan oil, gas, and infrastructure, financing everything from energy pipelines to advanced telecommunications projects. Venezuela, for Beijing, is not just a trading partner. It is a cornerstone of its expanding influence in the Western Hemisphere. At a televised press conference, Maduro, holding the latest Huawei smartphone, smiled as he addressed reporters. "China is our brother, our strategic ally," he said. "Together, we will build a new world." This moment was quickly broadcast across Chinese state television, celebrated as proof of an unshakable alliance against what Beijing called U.S. imperial aggression. Yet, as the Washington Post observed, behind the grand gestures and fiery speeches lies a precise geopolitical strategy. Venezuela's partnership with China represents not just survival, but a calculated shift in global power alignment. In Washington, the Pentagon has gone on high alert. Reports indicate that U.S. warships have begun intercepting Venezuelan vessels suspected of trafficking arms and narcotics. But behind closed doors, senior officials face an even graver question. Will the U.S. dare to confront China militarily if Beijing chooses to defend Venezuela? According to the Wall Street Journal, President Trump considered ordering a limited naval blockade, but his advisors urged caution, warning that any direct clash with Chinese vessels could spiral into an uncontrollable conflict. Even a single damaged destroyer, they said, could unleash global chaos. This marks a historic turning point. For the first time, China appears ready to challenge the U.S. far beyond its own borders, and to do so not for its territory, but for the sovereignty of another nation. Analysts at the Center for Strategic and International Studies argue this signals Beijing's transition from a regional defense power to a global superpower willing to project force across oceans. Venezuela, with the largest proven oil reserves on Earth, has become the perfect flashpoint, a prize that neither Washington nor Beijing is willing to lose. Meanwhile, propaganda in Caracas intensifies. Venezuelan television channels broadcast patriotic anthems and dramatic footage of Chinese destroyers leaving port, with captions reading, "Brothers in Arms." The Cuban newspaper Granma called this alliance a new dawn of global unity. Venezuelan Defense Minister Vladimir Padrino announced that joint exercises with Chinese forces would guarantee the peace, stability, and sovereignty of the homeland. But Washington's regional allies, Colombia and Brazil, are not convinced. The Colombian president warned through Reuters, if Chinese ships enter the Caribbean, the balance of power in the Americas will be permanently altered. In Brazil, according to Folha de São Paulo, talks are already underway to provide U.S. forces access to local air bases, a move that could pull the entire region into an armed standoff. Thus, what began as a bilateral feud has now evolved into a full-scale regional security crisis. Adding fuel to the fire, Trump's re-election campaign has embraced this crisis as a centerpiece of his foreign policy message. "We will not allow China to interfere in our hemisphere," he declared. Venezuela will be free again. But beyond the strong rhetoric lies a chilling reality: the U.S. must decide whether it is truly willing to engage China head-on. According to Bloomberg, this standoff could define a new era in geopolitics. If China succeeds in defending Venezuela, it would signify the collapse of the Monroe Doctrine, a cornerstone of American policy for over 200 years. If Washington prevails, it would reaffirm U.S. supremacy across Latin America. In the meantime, the crisis deepens. Nikkei Asia reports that joint Chinese-Venezuelan naval exercises are imminent, described as a rehearsal under crisis conditions. The Pentagon has raised readiness levels at bases in Puerto Rico and Miami, while satellite data reveals B-52 bombers patrolling the Caribbean skies. The world watches, breathless. Venezuela, once considered a regional power, has now become the center of a potential global confrontation. Inside NATO, unity is crumbling. Politico reports that members remain divided. The UK and Poland demand a strong US-led response, while Germany and France urge restraint. A German diplomat stated plainly, fighting China over Venezuela would be madness. Paris, meanwhile, has proposed launching a joint mediation mission to prevent escalation. Latin American nations are similarly divided. According to El País, Cuba and Nicaragua have pledged infrastructure support for Venezuela's defense, while Peru and Chile warn that Chinese military presence could militarize the entire region and ignite an arms race. Global markets have begun to react sharply. Bloomberg reports growing investor anxiety over possible disruptions in oil supply, while Foreign Affairs calls this the dawn of a new Cold War, one with a hotspot in America's own backyard. Experts are already drawing chilling comparisons to the Cuban Missile Crisis of 1962. Only this time, there are no missiles, but Chinese warships, no Cuba, but Venezuela. And as the US, China, and their allies maneuver dangerously close to open confrontation, one question hangs heavy in the air. Could this local crisis ignite a global war? No one knows. But one truth echoes in every capital across the world. We have entered a new and perilous chapter in human history, one where every decision, every miscalculation, could determine the fate of nations.